But from what I have just said, a different picture emerges. His actions are based not on emotions, but on cold calculation, on a rational approach to the current situation. Paradoxically, to be honest, we were actually interested in him staying in power and continuing to erode the regime with which we are in armed conflict. But from the perspective of strengthening Ukrainian statehood, it is clear that a different approach is needed, one that moves in an entirely different direction, bringing to power people who will have the trust of the Ukrainian people.
Do you think European leaders understand the current dynamics surrounding Ukraine?
You would have to ask them. Judging by their actions, I don't think they fully understand. But that is not even the main issue. The key point is that, unlike the new US president, political leaders of European countries are deeply tied to the current regime. They are committed to it. They have said and promised too much, and now, excuse my bluntness, backing out of this position is very difficult for them, if not practically impossible, without losing face. And considering that they are in a rather complicated and politically sensitive period, facing elections, re-elections, parliamentary challenges, and so on, it is nearly impossible for them to change their position under these circumstances. Unlike them, the current President of the United States, the newly elected President, has his hands free. He is not bound by these constraints that prevent progress and hinder efforts to resolve the conflict. It is in his character, perhaps. He acts straightforwardly and without much hesitation. His position is unique. He not only says what he thinks, but he says whatever he wants. Well, that is a privilege of the leader of one of the world's great powers.
A few days ago in St. Petersburg, I asked you about how everyone now wants to have a say in Russian-American negotiations. Yet the Europeans continue to insist and demand a voice in negotiations over Ukraine. How do you view this?
I don't see anything wrong with that. But no one can really demand anything here, especially from Russia. Let them demand from someone else. For centuries, they demanded anything they wanted from their vassals, but now demands are being made of them. So let them sit at home with their demands and think about how they ended up in this situation. However, their participation in the negotiation process is, of course, in demand. And we have never refused them. We have always maintained discussions with them. At some point, under various contrived ideas of defeating Russia on the battlefield, they themselves refuse to engage with us. If they want to return, go ahead. I saw the reaction to both my phone conversation with the US President and the high-level meeting in Riyadh. It was indeed emotional and lacked any practical meaning. Why? Because in order to resolve complex and even acute issues, including those related to Ukraine, both Russia and the United States must take the first step. What does that step entail? It should be aimed at increasing the level of trust between both states. That is precisely what we were engaged in at the Riyadh meeting, and that is what upcoming high-level contacts may focus on. Without this, it is impossible to resolve any issue, especially one as complex and sensitive as the Ukrainian crisis. But what do the Europeans have to do with this? This is a matter of bilateral Russian-American relations. Why are they needed here? What will they be doing? Incidentally, during both the phone conversation and the meeting in Riyadh, The Ukrainian crisis was, of course, mentioned, but it was not substantively discussed. We only agreed that we would approach it in due time. In this sense, and in this case, of course, we do not rule out the participation of European countries. I want to emphasize that we also respect the position of our friends in BRICS, who have formed a group of peace supporters. Just today, I spoke with the President of the People's Republic of China, and we discussed this as well. He informed me that the Friends of Peace group in New York will soon meet again to discuss this issue. We not only welcome, but are also grateful to all our partners who raise these issues and strive to achieve peace. Why am I saying this? Not only Europeans, but other countries also have the right and the ability to participate. And we treat this with respect.
I'd like to ask you to comment on a few more statements by Trump. There have been quite a lot, as I mentioned.
But not all of them, okay?
Not all of them. For example, he said he wants to propose to you and the Chinese leader to cut defense budgets in half. What do you think of this idea?
I know about it, and I can guess what it's based on. It is probably based on calculations from one of the British research centers, which estimated our expenses in terms of purchasing power parity. Last year, the U.S. had, I believe, already reached $968 billion, and if you combine Russian and Chinese expenditures, the figures roughly match. Russia and China together are comparable to U.S. spending. First of all, we need to verify these calculations. The British Center's estimates may be accurate, or they may be imprecise or completely incorrect. We need to look into that. That's the first point. Secondly, I cannot comment on how the People's Republic of China will respond to this. There have been various U.S. approaches regarding strategic offensive weapons and other serious matters, so that is up to China. However, as for us, we could negotiate with the United States. We are not against it. I think the idea is a good one. If the United States were to reduce its defense budget by 50%, we would reduce ours by 50%, and then China could join in if it wished. We consider this proposal a good one and are open to discussions on the matter.
Trump also imposed a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum imports from all countries. We used to have good cooperation with the U.S. on aluminum. What do you think of this trade policy?
Right now, I don't want to comment on U.S. trade policy. It has been tied to sanctions for many years. We consider these sanctions illegal and harmful to global trade and the economy. In my opinion, they damage both us and those who impose them. As for trade policy, higher tariffs, duties, and so on, each country determines for itself what is beneficial and what is not. I understand the logic behind it: to bring production back home, create jobs, ensure tax payments at all levels, and so on. But at some point, these measures will inevitably face certain difficulties, such as inflationary pressure, rising product costs, and so forth. But that's something the experts can explain to you in detail. As for aluminum, in 2017, if I remember correctly, we supplied about 15% of total U.S. aluminum imports. Approximately 15% came from Russia. In general, the U.S. produces about 60% of the aluminum it needs domestically, while 40% is imported. Of that, 15% used to come from the Russian Federation. Today, the main importer is Canada. If the decision were made to open the U.S. market to our producers, we could sell approximately 2 million tons on the American market. This would not have a significant impact on price formation, but, in my opinion, would still have a stabilizing effect on price levels. More importantly, in my view, is that we could explore joint efforts with American companies in this sector. For instance, back in Soviet times, there were plans to build a new hydroelectric power station in the Krasnoyarsk region and expand aluminum production there. After all, aluminum is primarily about energy, and preferably cheap energy. Hydroelectric power is both inexpensive and environmentally friendly. These plans, dating back to Soviet times, still exist. However, they are capital intensive and require significant investment. By preliminary estimates, such a project would cost around $15 billion in today's prices, but it is worth considering. Yes, the current U.S. president's policy is focused on relocating production within the United States. However, if American companies operate in Russia, that would also be beneficial, and significantly so. These companies would earn substantial profits, and the corresponding volumes of aluminum would be supplied to the domestic market at fully reasonable market prices. There is much to consider here, including cooperation on rare earth metals and other areas, such as energy.
By the way, just a few minutes ago, I read a fresh report from the U.S. President Trump announced that the U.S. and Russia are discussing major economic projects as part of negotiations on Ukraine.
Yes, some of our companies are in contact with each other and are discussing such projects.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.